blessed by a goddess, coveted by the mightiest beings in creation. Morgoth wore them in his crown, despite the agony of their burning. Fëanor refused to surrender them, even to save the world. 7 brothers swore an unbreakable oath to pursue them, and every single one died trying. The Silmarils contained the last pure light of creation before darkness corrupted the world. They were genuinely sacred, objects of supreme beauty, and they doomed an entire age. This is the story of how 3 jewels sparked 5 wars, destroyed kingdoms, reshaped Middle-earth itself, and why their light still shines when all other lights go out. To understand why the Silmarils mattered so profoundly, we need to go back to the beginning, not to their creation, but to the nature of light itself in Tolkien's cosmos. In the ancient days before the sun and moon existed, the world was illuminated by the 2 trees of Valinor. Telperion the silver and Laurelin the gold stood in the land of the Valar, radiating pure, unmarred radiance. They weren't ordinary trees. They were living embodiments of divine creation, watered by the wells of Varda and tended by Yavanna herself. But even the trees weren't the first luminance. Scholar Verlin Flieger traces a pattern through Tolkien's work, a progressive fragmentation of divine illumination. It began with the flame imperishable, the creative power of Eru Ilúvatar himself. This flame was divided into the 2 lamps that first illuminated the world in its infancy. When Melkor destroyed the lamps, their power became concentrated in the 2 trees. And from those trees came something even more concentrated, more desperately preserved. The Silmarils. Around the year 1450 of the Years of the Trees, during what's called the noontide of Valinor, the peak of peace and creativity, an elf named Fëanor accomplished something no one has duplicated before or since. The Silmarillion tells us, "The shells of the gems were crafted of the hard, crystalline substance Silima, which Fëanor had devised, and they were named after it. In their hearts shone the light of Valinor from the 2 trees." How did he do it? What was Silima made of? Even the text admits, their exact nature and the manner of their making were known only to Fëanor, and none other succeeded in making gems of comparable greatness and beauty. It's deliberately mysterious, technology that borders on magic, or magic that achieves what seems like technology. But here's what matters. The Silmarils now contain the last fragment of unmarred brilliance from creation itself. When Morgoth and the spider demon Ungoliant destroyed the 2 trees just 45 years later, these 3 jewels held all that remained of that divine essence. Think about that. The radiance of creation, the progression from the flame imperishable through multiple diminishments, had been concentrated into 3 fist-sized gems. Everything else was gone or corrupted. The Silmarils were the last link to the world as it was meant to be, before Morgoth's marring. This is why they became the most coveted objects in existence. They weren't valuable because of rarity or beauty alone. They were fragments of paradise, locked in crystal. To claim them meant holding the last piece of an unfallen world. And that made them supremely dangerous. Fëanor wasn't just any craftsman. He was the greatest of all the Noldor, the deep elves renowned for their skill and knowledge. His name meant Spirit of Fire, and everything about him blazed with intensity, his creativity, his passion, his pride. Born to the High King Finwë and the Lady Miriel, Fëanor came into the world at great cost. His mother poured so much of her essence into his birth that she chose to die afterward, the first elf ever to do so voluntarily. From the beginning, he was marked by brilliance and loss. He created wonders beyond the Silmarils, the Tengwar script that would be used throughout the ages, the Palantiri seeing stones, Fëanorian lamps that rivaled starlight. Scholar Tom Shippey identifies what he calls the elvish sin. Not disobedience like the biblical fall, but rather the desire to make things which will forever reflect or incarnate their own personality. Fëanor embodied this impulse completely. And here's what's fascinating. Tolkien identified with it. As a creator, as a sub-creator of entire worlds, he understood the drive to make something that would last, that would carry your vision forward. That made Fëanor's story deeply personal for him, a warning to himself about the dark side of creation. At first, Fëanor shared his greatest work. He displayed the Silmarils at festivals. He let others marvel at them. They became symbols of the glory of the Eldar, proof of what the children of Ilúvatar could achieve. But gradually, something shifted. Rumors reached him, whispers that Melkor coveted the jewels, that the Valar themselves desired them. Some legends say that Galadriel's hair, combining silver and gold like the trees themselves, inspired his creation, and that he requested a strand 3 times. She refused each time, seeing darkness growing in him. Whether that story is true or not, the pattern is clear. Fëanor moved from sharing to hoarding. He locked the Silmarils away in a vault at Forminos. He grew suspicious, possessive, resentful of anyone who looked at them too long. The creative pride that had made them became the obsessive attachment that would unmake everything. And then came the test. When Morgoth and Ungoliant destroyed the 2 trees, the Valar faced a choice. Yavanna, who had created the trees, believed she could restore them, but only if she had access to their light. The only remaining light existed in the Silmarils. They came to Fëanor and asked him to surrender his creations, to break them open so the trees could live again. He refused. Listen to his reasoning. If the Valar forced him to hand over the Silmarils, he would refuse. They had been made, he told them, so that the light of the trees might live on even when the trees themselves were dead. To destroy the jewels now would be to destroy that light, something he would not do, least of all for the Valar, who had commanded that the trees be made in the first place and who had failed to guard them. His logic was twisted but powerful. He'd made them to preserve the light. Breaking them would destroy the preservation. And underneath the logic lay the raw truth. He couldn't let them go. Not even to undo the greatest catastrophe Valinor had ever known. That choice, valuing his creation over the greater good, marked his fall. It parallels Morgoth's own descent. Both were the greatest of their kind, both put themselves at the center of the universe, both fell through possessiveness of a thing. And the tragedy? Even as he refused to surrender them willingly, Morgoth was already at Forminos, slaying Fëanor's father and stealing the jewels from the vault. The choice that would have redeemed him became impossible, and everything that followed, every battle, every kinslaying, every tragedy of the First Age, grew from that moment of refusal. But the Silmarils weren't ordinary jewels, vulnerable to ordinary theft. Before Morgoth's betrayal, something significant happened that would shape every attempt to possess them. Varda, the Queen of the Stars, mightiest of the Valier, hallowed them. The text tells us, Varda hallowed the Silmarils, so that thereafter no mortal flesh, nor hands unclean, nor anything of evil will might touch them, but they would be scorched and withered. This blessing transformed them from beautiful objects into moral judges. They would scorch anyone unworthy, not with ordinary fire, but with a spiritual flame that judged based on the state of your soul. No degrees, no mercy, no second chances. You were worthy, or you were condemned. It made them absolutely just, and that made them absolutely terrifying. When Morgoth killed Finwë and seized the Silmarils from their vault, he got his first taste of Varda's blessing. The moment he touched them, His hands turned black, and they remained ever after. Nor was he ever free from the pain of their searing judgment. Think about that. Morgoth, a Valar, one of the Ainur who sang the world into being, the most powerful entity in Middle-earth, was permanently marked and perpetually tormented by these jewels. His hands stayed black, the agony never stopped. Yet he kept them anyway. He fled with Ungoliant to Middle-earth, and when she demanded them as payment for her help destroying the trees, he refused, despite the agony of touching them again. His covetousness overpowered even divine judgment. He set them in his iron crown in Angband, wearing objects that constantly tormented him because he could not bear to be parted from them. One scholar notes, "For a creature of evil, the Silmarils might as well have been made of red-hot iron." Yet Morgoth wore that crown for centuries. Here's the paradox at the heart of the Silmaril story. They are genuinely blessed objects, consecrated by divine power, containing the last unmarred light of creation. They should be instruments of good. Yet they become the cause of catastrophic evil, not because there's anything wrong with them, but because the holiness that makes them beautiful also makes them unbearable to claim. The One Ring is inherently evil, forged by Sauron to dominate. The Silmarils are inherently sacred, blessed by Varda to remain pure. Yet both demonstrate what Tolkien called covetousness grown to obsession, the desire that corrupts everything it touches. The catastrophe is that something supremely good becomes an instrument of supreme destruction, not through any fault in the object, but through the fatal flaw in those who desire it. And Fëanor, upon learning of the theft and his father's murder, proved that he was no different from Morgoth in his covetousness. He swore an oath, and that oath would make Morgoth's suffering look merciful. In his grief and rage, Fëanor spoke words that would echo through centuries and destroy everyone who repeated them. He named Melkor Morgoth, the Black Enemy, and swore an unbreakable vow. The Oath of Fëanor bound him and his 7 sons to pursue the Silmarils at any cost, against any foe, forever. This oath we will keep. We are threatened with many evils, and treason not least, but one thing is not said, that we shall suffer from cowardice. One by one his sons joined him, Maedhros, Maglor, Celegorm, Caranthir, Curufin, Amrod, and Amras. 7 voices binding themselves to an absolute vow made in rage and pain. They had no idea what they were creating. The Valar, particularly Mandos, the judge of the dead, saw what was coming. As the Noldor prepared to leave Valinor against the Valar's council, marching to war against Morgoth, Mandos spoke the doom, a prophecy that was also a warning. "Tears unnumbered you shall shed," he proclaimed, "and the Valar will fence Valinor against you and shut you out, so that not even the echo of your lamentation shall pass over the mountains." And then the heart of it. On the house of Fëanor, the wrath of the Valar lieth from the west unto the uttermost east, and upon all that will follow them it shall be laid also. Their oath shall drive them, and yet betray them, and ever snatch away the very treasures that they have sworn to pursue. Here's what's fascinating. The doom and the oath create opposing forces. The oath demands they pursue the Silmarils at any cost. The doom predicts that this pursuit will perpetually fail and corrupt them. Every attempt to fulfill the oath makes them less worthy, and being less worthy means the hallowed Silmarils will judge them more harshly. It's a perfect trap, self-reinforcing, inescapable. But, and this matters, it's not compulsion. The doom predicts what will happen based on knowledge of their characters, but it doesn't force it. Each step deeper into tragedy is a choice. The genius of Tolkien's design is that the prophecy works by showing how predictable moral corruption is once you start down that path. And Fëanor proved Mandos right almost immediately. They needed ships to reach Middle-earth. The Teleri, the Sea Elves, possessed the finest fleet in Valinor. Fëanor asked for their help. The Teleri refused, not wanting to defy the Valar or leave their beloved shores. So Fëanor took the ships by force. Elf slew elf for the first time in the history of Arda. The white keys of Alqualonde ran red. They called it the first kinslaying, and it was the first step into an abyss that would swallow all of Fëanor's sons. Fëanor himself died within a year of reaching Middle-earth, mortally wounded by Balrogs in the battle under stars. His body turned to ash as his fiery spirit departed, so intense was his nature. But with his dying breath, he charged his sons to keep the oath. And they did. Oh, they did. For nearly 600 years of the First Age, the War of the Jewels raged. The sons of Fëanor fought Morgoth, yes, but they also fought anyone else who possessed or claimed a Silmaril. And with each battle, each compromise, each darker deed, they moved further from worthiness. Until the burning question became, even if they recovered the Silmarils, would the jewels still accept their touch? The doom had predicted it, the oath had driven them to it, and the Silmarils themselves, hallowed and just, would be the final judges. For centuries, the Silmarils seemed utterly beyond reach. Morgoth wore them in his iron crown deep in Angband, guarded by armies of orcs, balrogs, dragons, and every horror he could devise. Every assault on his fortress failed. Until two people succeeded where armies could not. Beren was a mortal man, an outlaw hunted by Morgoth. Lúthien was an immortal elf princess, daughter of a king and a Maya. Their love crossed every boundary, mortality and immortality, man and elf, hunted and royal. When Beren asked for Lúthien's hand, her father, Thingol, who didn't want his daughter marrying a mortal, set an impossible task. Bring me a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, and you may marry her. It was meant to be impossible, a way of saying never without saying it. But Beren, rather than giving up, accepted the quest. And here's where the story transforms. Because Beren didn't quest for glory or revenge or possession, he quested for love, for the right to marry Lúthien. The Silmaril wasn't the end, it was the price for something greater. That difference mattered. Together, Beren and Lúthien infiltrated Angband. They passed the great wolf Carcharoth at the gates. They entered Morgoth's throne room, where he sat crowned with the burning jewels, surrounded by his court of horrors. And Lúthien sang. Her song, part elvish magic, part Maiarin power inherited from her mother Melian, put the Dark Lord himself to sleep. Morgoth toppled from his throne, his crown rolled across the floor. The most terrifying being in Middle-earth slept like a child, while Beren cut a Silmaril free with the knife Angrist. The text tells us something remarkable. The jewel suffered his touch and hurt him not. Wait, Varda hallowed the Silmarils to burn mortal flesh and unclean hands. Beren was mortal. He was, by definition, unworthy compared to immortal elves or divine Valar. Why didn't it burn him? The elves themselves weren't certain. They theorized it was the righteousness of his quest, or Lúthien's involvement, or that love purifies. But the truth is, the text admits mystery here. Somehow Beren's motivation, questing not to possess but to give away, not for himself but for love, made him worthy where greater beings failed. They nearly escaped, but Morgoth stirred, and Beren's knife broke on the crown, and the sound woke Morgoth. They fled with Carcharoth biting off Beren's hand, the hand holding the Silmaril, and the wolf swallowing the jewel. The consecrated jewel burned the wolf from inside. Carcharoth went mad with agony, ravaging the land. Eventually they hunted and slew the beast, recovering the Silmaril from its corpse. Beren died in that hunt, but Lúthien's grief moved the Valar to mercy. They were allowed to return to life together, though Lúthien chose to become mortal to stay with him. And the Silmaril? Beren gave it to Thingol as promised, not as his treasure, but as his bride price. He surrendered it willingly. The Silmarillion declares their deed the greatest that has ever been dared by elves or by men in the history of Arda. Not because of force, not because of armies or power or magical weapons, but because love drove them to attempt the impossible and surrender allowed them to bear what possession could not. It was a lesson the sons of Fëanor should have learned. They didn't. One Silmaril now dwelt in Doriath, Thingol's hidden kingdom. The other two remained in Morgoth's crown, and the sons of Fëanor, bound by their oath, couldn't rest while even one jewel escaped their grasp. For decades they held back. Thingol was mighty, Doriath was protected by Melion's girdle, and Beren, who had faced Morgoth himself, was still alive. But time is patient, and the oath is relentless. Thingol became obsessed with the Silmaril. He commissioned dwarven smiths to set it in the Nauglamir, an ancient necklace of surpassing beauty. When they saw the jewel and necklace together, the dwarves desired them. They killed Thingol in a dispute over payment. Even those who gained the Silmaril righteously couldn't escape its curse. Thingol's death broke Melion's protection. Grief-stricken, she departed for Valinor, and Doriath became vulnerable. Thingol's grandson Dior inherited the Silmaril, and the sons of Fëanor, seeing Doriath weakened and their oath unfulfilled, sent demands. Surrender the jewel. Dior refused. So they attacked. The second kinslaying destroyed Doriath. Dior and his wife were killed. 3 of Fëanor's sons, Celegorm, Curufin, and Caranthir, died in the assault. The survivors searched the ruins for the Silmaril but couldn't find it. Because Dior's daughter Elwing had fled with it to the havens of Sirion. Years passed. The survivors of Gondolin and Doriath gathered at the havens, refugees seeking peace. But the oath knew no peace. When the sons of Fëanor learned where the Silmaril was, they demanded it. Again, refusal. The third kinslaying was the worst. They attacked refugee settlements. They killed elves who had been allies against Morgoth. It's described as the most terrible of the kinslayings, slaughtering their own people in their moment of desperate need. 2 more brothers, Amrod and Amras, died in the assault. Only Maedhros and Maglor survived, and again they didn't find the Silmaril. Because Elwing, cornered by the assault, threw herself into the sea rather than surrender it. Ulmo, the Valar, transformed her into a bird, and she flew to find her husband, Eärendil the mariner, bearing the jewel with her. See the pattern? Every kinslaying costs the oath-takers more than it gains them. Every attempt to fulfill the vow makes them less worthy of what they pursue. The Doom had predicted exactly this. Their oath shall drive them, and yet betray them. Eärendil, inheriting Beren and Lúthien's courage, did something unprecedented. He sailed to Valinor itself, passing barriers that should have been impassable, bearing the Silmaril as a token of Middle-earth's desperate need. He pleaded with the Valar to intervene against Morgoth. The Valar, moved by his sacrifice and the token of ancient light he bore, relented from their isolation. They assembled the host of the West. The War of Wrath lasted 42 years. It broke Morgoth's power forever, shattered his fortress of Angband, and sank most of Beleriand beneath the sea. And Calagon the Black, greatest of all dragons, fell from the sky and broke the peaks of Thangorodrim. Morgoth was captured and cast into the void beyond the world. The First Age ended. The 2 Silmarils in Morgoth's crown were recovered. The Valar held them in safekeeping. And Maedhros and Maglor, the last surviving sons, faced their final choice. They sent a message to Eonwe, the herald of Manwe. "We claim the Silmarils by right of our father's creation and our vow." Eonwe replied, "You have lost that right through your evil deeds. Come to Valinor and submit to judgment, and perhaps mercy will be shown." They couldn't. Their vow drove them still. In the night, they crept into the Valar's camp and stole the 2 remaining Silmarils. And the hallowed jewels seared their hands. The text tells us, "The jewel seared the hand of Maedhros in pain unbearable, and he perceived that his right thereto had become void, and that the oath was vain." 600 years of war, 3 kinslayings, the deaths of all 5 brothers, kingdoms destroyed, an entire age of the world scarred by their pursuit. And in the end, their vow was revealed as meaningless. They had forfeited their right to the very objects they'd sacrificed everything to claim. Maedhros, in anguish and despair, cast himself into a volcanic chasm with his Silmaril still clutched in his tortured hand. Maglor threw his into the sea and is said to wander the shores of Middle-earth still, singing laments that will never end. The 3 Silmarils, which Fëanor had crafted to preserve the tree's radiance, now rested where no one could reach them. One in the sky, one in the depths of the earth, and one in the ocean's abyss. The doom was fulfilled. Their vow was broken by its own success, and the first age of the world ended in the silence of irrevocable loss. But that's not the end of the story. Because while the Silmarils were lost to mortal hands, their influence, and, most importantly, their light, endured. Eärendil, who had brought the Silmaril to Valinor in humility rather than pride, was given a choice. He could choose the fate of elves or the fate of men. He chose the elven path, and the Valar transformed him into something unprecedented. They set him in his ship Vingilot and raised him into the sky, the Silmaril bound upon his brow. He became a living star, the brightest in the heavens, visible at dawn and dusk. The Silmarillion describes the moment. When first Vingilot was set to sail in the seas of heaven, it rose unlooked for, glittering and bright, and the people of Middle-earth beheld it from afar and wondered, and they took it for a sign and called it Gil Estel, the star of high hope. The jewel that had caused so much devastation became a symbol of grace. The light that had been hoarded and fought over and corrupted by greed was given freely to the world, visible to all, owned by none, eternally present. It shone throughout the Second Age, and in the Third Age, when darkness grew again under Sauron's power, that same light still had the power to kindle hope. Galadriel, who had lived through the First Age and witnessed all the tragedy of the Silmarils, did something remarkable. She captured light from Eärendil's star, light descended directly from the Silmaril in her fountain. And when Frodo departed Lothlorien on his impossible quest, she gave him a crystal phial containing that light. "In this phial," she told him, "is caught the light of Eärendil's star set amid the waters of my fountain. It will shine still brighter when night is about you. May it be a light to you in dark places when all other lights go out." And it was. When Frodo faced Shelob in her lair, the spawn of the same Ungoliant who had helped destroy the 2 trees, he raised the phial and cried out, "Aya Eärendil Elenion Ankalima." Hail Eärendil, brightest of stars. Radiance that had been crafted in Valinor before the sun existed, that had been stolen and fought over and sworn upon, that had seared Morgoth's hands and broken the sons of Fëanor, that had been transformed into a star of hope. That same brilliance, thousands of years later, helped destroy the power of Sauron. The fragmentation that Verlin Flieger traced, From flame imperishable, to lamps, to trees, to Silmarils, to sun and moon, to one star, to a phial, reached its ultimate division. The smallest fragment still potent enough to combat the greatest darkness. And here's the profound irony. Fëanor was right about one thing. He declared with his dying breath that the deeds that we shall do shall be the matter of song until the last days of Varda. He was absolutely correct, but not in the way he intended. The songs aren't of glorious victory, they're of sorrowful failure, of warning against pride and greed and oaths made in rage. Yet even that serves a purpose beyond his intention. By becoming the ultimate cautionary tale, the story of the Silmarils teaches what mere preaching could not. And the radiance he captured? It transcended his hoarding entirely. He tried to keep it for himself and his house alone. Instead, it became a gift to the entire world, a star visible to all, a phial given freely, a hope that could not be extinguished no matter how deep the darkness. The three Silmarils rest in sky, earth, and sea, a complete presence throughout creation, lost to mortal hands, but not lost to meaning. Their physical absence became their spiritual victory. Because in the end, the Silmarils teach us what Tolkien most wanted to convey, that beauty cannot be owned, only beheld. That brilliance is meant to be shared, not hoarded. That the greatest deeds come from surrender, not grasping. And that grace can transform even the most sorrowful loss into unexpected hope. 3 jewels doomed an entire age, but 1 jewel redeemed it. And that light, fragmented, divided, scattered, still shines in the darkness, waiting for those who need it most. The light endures. And that, perhaps, was the point all along. Fëanor created the Silmarils to preserve something beautiful, to capture the light of paradise before it faded. In that, he succeeded beyond measure. The light he imprisoned in crystal still shines in our sky as the evening star, still kindles hope in the darkest places, still connects the ancient world to the age of men. But he also taught us the cost of grasping too tightly. The moment we try to own beauty rather than steward it, to possess light rather than share it, we transform blessing into curse. The Silmarils were always meant to shine for everyone. It just took thousands of years and unimaginable tragedy for that truth to be fulfilled. Sometimes the greatest gifts can only be received with open hands, and sometimes the light we tried to keep for ourselves becomes truly ours only when we let it go. If this deep dive into the tragedy and redemption of the Silmarils moved you, subscribe to Ranger of the Realms for more explorations of Tolkien's profound mythology. And let me know in the comments, do you think Fëanor will ever be released from the halls of Mandos? Or does his pride bind him there until the end of Arda? May your path be lit by stars you cannot own, but will always guide you.